Hey everyone, today we're talking about something that most people never admit out loud. You don't actually want love, you want control. Picture this. You're sitting across from someone you say you love. You smile, you nod, you're agreeable. But deep inside your stomach tightens every time they hesitate. Your mind starts spinning stories when they pull away. You try to act calm, but you're already preparing your next move to bring them closer again. And if you think silence is weakness, maybe you've never heard it scream. This isn't about blame, it's about honesty. Because sometimes the shadow side of us doesn't crave affection, it craves power, safety, certainty. So before you get too comfortable, like the video and subscribe, but only if you really enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is over there. Now turn off the lights, maybe turn on a fan for some soft background noise. And let's begin today's journey together. You call it love, but what you're really offering is a deal. A contract, unspoken but rigid. I give you my care, my attention, my best version, and in return, you don't leave me. You call it unconditional, but it's lined with panic. You smile through the fear, you overextend. You apologize when you're not at fault, not because you're kind, but because you're scared. That's not love. That's self-erasure disguised as devotion. You're not loving them. You're managing their perception of you. You need them to think you're good, safe, deserving. So you bury your anger. You soften your voice. You become their emotional life support. Because if they need you, they won't leave you. Right. This is the shadow in action. It's clever. It tells you that love means showing up no matter what. But what it really means is, don't give them a reason to walk. That's not connection. That's a hostage negotiation with a smile. Real love doesn't sound like that. It's quieter, less desperate, more honest. But honesty means they might leave, and you're not ready for that. Not yet. You say you want their love, but what you really want is to never feel powerless again. It's not their heart you're after. It's their certainty. You want to know they'll stay, that you matter, that you're the one. You want to stop checking your phone like it's an oxygen tank. You want to stop rewriting every conversation in your head. You want to rest, but only if you know you're safe. And here's the truth. What you call love is often just your shadow begging for control. That feeling you chase when you say, I miss them, it's not just longing. It's your nervous system flaring up because the script has gone off track. When you say, I just need closure, what you really mean is, I want to feel in charge of how this ends. You don't want the chaos. You want the steering wheel, even if it means lying to yourself about what's real. So you become perfect. You overachieve in relationships. You play the role of caretaker, listener, peacemaker. You perform, you contort. Because if you can control how they see you, you can control whether they leave you. That's the story your shadow tells. That safety comes from power. From managing every look, every pause, every tone. From being one step ahead of abandonment. But love, real love, doesn't work that way. It can't be choreographed. It can't be managed like a crisis. Love that grows, breathes. Love that heals, releases. And love that lasts doesn't need you to shrink for it. But when your shadow's in charge, shrinking feels like the only way to survive. You say you're just looking out for them. You say you're doing it out of love. But let's be honest, it's not just care, it's control. You check in constantly. You worry out loud. You offer advice they never asked for. You try to fix their sadness. You explain yourself more than necessary, just so they don't get the wrong idea. And underneath all of that, a fear that if you don't do these things, you'll lose them. You micromanage your presence in their life like a project. You think being indispensable will make you irreplaceable. So you insert yourself into their pain. You become their emotional technician, their unpaid therapist, their emergency contact. But here's what you don't want to admit. You don't do it just to help. You do it to keep a position in their life, to be so needed they won't risk letting you go. And that's not love. That's a power move disguised as nurturing. You think if you become their anchor, they won't drift. But what you're really doing is tying both of you to the bottom. You aren't loving freely. You're trying to be irreplaceable. You're trading intimacy for influence. But love doesn't grow under surveillance. It suffocates when you try to control its weather. The more you try to become everything for them, the more you disappear. Because love without freedom isn't love. It's fear in a costume. And every time you overgive, every time you insert yourself without invitation, You are not connecting. You're managing. So ask yourself, if they didn't need you, would they still choose you? And if the answer scares you, that's the shadow talking. Somewhere deep inside you, there's a little version of you still frozen in time, still waiting to be chosen, still terrified of being left behind. This isn't about adult logic. It's about survival patterns that got wired into your body when you were too young to understand them. Maybe it was a parent who pulled away when you cried. Maybe it was love that came with strings, or silence that screamed louder than words. Whatever it was, it taught you one thing: love isn't safe unless you're in control of it. So now your shadow, the part of you that never got what it needed, steps in like a panicked child trying to run the ship. You read tone like it's gospel. You panic when a message goes unanswered. You rehearse your responses like you're on trial. You say, "I just want to be loved." But what you really mean is, "I want to feel like I matter enough that no one ever disappears on me again." And that's not weak, that's human. But when your wounded inner child takes the wheel, you don't love, you cling. You don't relate, you react. You're not seeing the person in front of you. You're reliving someone else's absence. And you'll bend, break, and betray yourself just to make sure it doesn't happen again. You confuse peace with boredom. You confuse silence with rejection. You confuse boundaries with abandonment, because the child in you still believes love means sacrificing your truth to feel safe. But that child isn't in danger anymore. You are not 7 years old standing in an emotional drought. You are grown now. You can feel the fear and still choose a different response. That's the beginning of real love. The kind that doesn't scream for control, because it knows it's already whole. You do everything right. You show up, you give, you adjust, you try to be the most understanding person in the room. And at first, it feels good. It feels powerful to be so needed, until it doesn't. Until you start noticing how drained you feel, how irritated, how invisible. You start counting what you've given and what they haven't. You say nothing, but the resentment grows like mold behind your smile. And then when it gets too heavy to carry, you snap. Or you shut down. Or you disappear without warning. And afterward, you hate yourself for it. You replay the meltdown in your mind, blaming your emotions like they betrayed you. But they didn't. They tried to warn you. They were the smoke signal rising from the quiet fire of self-abandonment. Because this is the loop you overextend. You get exhausted. You feel unseen, you explode, and then you shame yourself for needing anything at all. You learn to call that love, but it's not. It's a transaction with no receipts. It's performance art with no standing ovation. It's martyrdom disguised as romance. You think that if you're everything for someone else, you'll finally be enough for yourself. But you're not being loved, you're being used. And the worst part? You volunteered. You trained them to expect you to give endlessly. You made your worth depend on how little you asked for. That's not generosity, that's fear in a fancy dress. And healing starts when you stop seeing boundaries as betrayal. When you stop calling your exhaustion being a good partner. When you realize that real love doesn't require you to disappear. To you, letting go feels like death. Not because the person is everything, but because control has become your oxygen. If you're not monitoring the tone of their texts, if you're not watching for signs they're pulling away, if you're not staying one emotional step ahead, you feel exposed, vulnerable, weak. Because when you stop controlling, you have to face the terrifying truth: they get to choose. They get to walk away. They get to love you imperfectly or not at all. And that breaks the fantasy. Your shadow depends on that if you do everything right, you can guarantee love. So you stay on edge. You stay helpful. You over-communicate, over-apologize, over-function. You become someone whose value is tied to effort, because without effort, you fear you're nothing. And here's the thing most people won't tell you. You're not addicted to them. You're addicted to the illusion of control. Because deep down, you don't trust love. Not the kind that's free, wild, imperfect. You only trust the kind you can manage. The kind you can shape. The kind that makes you feel like you're steering the ship, even if it's headed toward a slow crash. But that isn't love. That's fear trying to wear something softer. And if you ever want real connection, you have to be willing to lose your grip. You have to be okay with being misunderstood, with being left, with being enough, even if they don't stay. Because control might keep you safe, but it won't keep you warm. Real love, the kind you say you want, asks you to stop performing. It doesn't need you to fix, or to chase, or to prove yourself worthy with endless effort. It just needs you to show up as you. No mask, no script, no hidden agenda. But for someone who's spent their life surviving through control that feels like jumping out of a plane with no parachute. You've spent years building this persona, the caretaker, the peacemaker, the dependable one. The version of you who anticipates needs, avoids conflict, keeps everyone happy. Because being needed felt like love. Being wanted felt like safety. But now you're tired, not just physically, emotionally. Because every time you bend yourself to keep someone, you lose a little more of who you really are. So here it is, the hardest truth of all. You have to let go of being needed to ever experience being loved. You have to stop controlling how they see you and start trusting that your real self is worthy of being chosen. Even if you're messy, even if you have needs, even if you say no. Control may have protected you, but it also trapped you. Because when love is real, it doesn't feel like a contract. It feels like peace, like stillness, like a quiet knowing I don't have to earn this. So let the shadow tremble, let it scream, but don't let it keep running your relationships. You are not a hostage. You are not a product. You are not a performance. You are a person. You are worthy. You are enough even without control. Real love, the kind you say you want, asks you to stop performing. It doesn't need you to fix, or to chase, or to prove yourself worthy with endless effort. It just needs you to show up as you. No mask, no script, no hidden agenda. But for someone who's spent their life surviving through control, that feels like jumping out of a plane with no parachute. You've spent years building this persona, the caretaker, the peacemaker, the dependable one. The version of you who anticipates needs, avoids conflict, keeps everyone happy. Because being needed felt like love. Being wanted felt like safety. But now you're tired. Not just physically, emotionally. Because every time you bend yourself to keep someone, you lose a little more of who you really are. So here it is, the hardest truth of all. You have to let go of being needed to ever experience being loved. You have to stop controlling how they see you and start trusting that your real self is worthy of being chosen. Even if you're messy, even if you have needs, even if you say no. Control may have protected you, but it also trapped you. Because when love is real, it doesn't feel like a contract. It feels like peace, like stillness, like a quiet knowing I don't have to earn this. So let the shadow tremble, let it scream, but don't let it keep running your relationships. You are not a hostage. You are not a product. You are not a performance. You are a person. You are worthy. You are enough even without control.